All right. Now let's see if this works. We are coming in live. Great morning, humans. Great morning, world. Coming to you live from Cancun, Mexico, in a hotel room. So you'll notice that things look a little bit different than normal. So I'm just going to, as usual, just request that some people maybe that are here with us live chime in and let me know if you can hear me because we've got our road set up here. I'm actually holding my mic. And we are going to jump into a live broadcast of the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. And we've got a really, really cool topic. So if you're here with me live today, normally we come in on Mondays, but I had food poisoning and that wasn't an option. So if you're here with us today, it's not our normal day and you can hear me, then let me know because we're streaming on Substack and on YouTube and always looking for a little bit of sound confirmation if you could. Because we've done episodes here where we're about 15 minutes in and we realize that nobody can hear us. So we've got some throat clearing going on for the live broadcast. So if you can hear me, just so I can get started on this episode here, just chime in and let me know if you could. I don't know how good our connection is, but it looks like it's pretty good. Looking for that first person to confirm that you can hear me, that we're streaming and you can hear me on Substack and on YouTube. All right. There could be a delay in coming through because I see that folks are here, but I'm just looking to get confirmation that you can hear me on Substack. If you're here with me on Substack, give me a thumbs up in the comments. I see that Diane is here. Okay, good. Pamela says that she can hear on YouTube. Thank you so much, Pamela. It's always so nice when you reach out and ask a question and you get an answer. All right, awesome. Okay, D. Nelson Smith says on Substack you can hear. So once again, great morning world, great morning humans. This is Dr. JC Doornick, otherwise known as the Dragon, and coming to you live on a Tuesday. Typically we do these on Mondays at 8 a.m., but I'm here in Cancun, Mexico, and I'm sure you've heard the stories, but it happened to me, right? Or it happened for me, right? But I got food poisoning and didn't sleep much and did a bunch of other things all night before the Monday. So we had to reschedule. So we are here on a Tuesday, and this is one of the solo episodes. You'll notice that today our interview episode, fantastic interview with Dr. Darshan Shah, who's just revolutionizing healthcare. You'll see that on the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast, that episode dropped today. So every Tuesday we have our interviews, and then on Fridays will be this episode. So case in point, if you're here with me live today on Substack or YouTube and we get into a little bit of a dialogue, perhaps you'll ask a question, or maybe you can just chime in and give us some insight on some of the stuff that we're talking about. And if it's relevant, it'll end up on the episode. So this episode will post after it's been cleaned up and shortened on Friday. So I see Things I Couldn't Say Before has joined us, Assemblywoman Deborah Mezzarelli, James Akama, Antonio Diaz, D. Nelson, Diane. Great morning to everybody. And for those of you joining us on YouTube, a great morning to you as well. So today is going to be something that I'm going to share that comes from my book, but we're calling this The Secret Map to Your Life, Why Nothing is Random. And remember, on the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast, but in the Make Sense ecosystem, we're never like preaching and teaching. You'll notice that it's never my intention to tell people what is or what people should do. It's more about pointing something out that I find interesting, something that was useful for me that I'm paying forward. But my hat says it all. It says, HMMM, which stands for haven't made up my mind about anything. So for me, I just revel in uncertainty. And in a world that demands certainty and demands us to know things, I just love, call it a revolution. I just love the idea of not knowing and not feeling that I need to know so fast, and I don't think that that's a cop out or some sort of a weakness. I think it's one of the wisest decisions that I've ever made was allowing myself to not have to know at least so fast and not have to be certain, because I find that anytime I'm certain about something and I put an exclamation point behind it rather than a question mark, I've just closed myself off to growth. So, what I'm going to share with you today is something that comes right from my book. It's in the book, and that's the Make Sense book that came out recently, and that is this concept of the crazy wall. And you'll notice that in the book, in the beginning, there's a QR code that you can download assets from, and one of those assets is this exercise. So, if you like this exercise, you can do it on your own. But if you have the book, or you grab the book on Amazon, that's Make Sense: How to Rewire Your Mind and Transform Your Life by me, you can get the actual exercise. So let's begin. I see Tango Pigeon here from the islands. That's my mother. Phoenix Down Academy. Good to see everybody. All right. So here we go. So have you ever looked at your life and wondered, I'm sure you have, but why does this keep happening to me? I mean, I've been in that situation before. Or does any of this actually mean anything? I question that all the time. And is everything in some sort of mysterious way? Is everything connected? Do you ever get in that sense where you're just wondering if everything's connected, and does everything mean something? Because we're constantly looking at that stuff on this show. So most people feel like they're just bouncing from one random event to the next, stuck in a story that they didn't even write themselves. We talk a lot about that on the show. We recognize that the story that's going on our head, it's not necessarily been written by us. So stuck in a story that they didn't even write, trying to make sense of something that doesn't really seem to make sense. If you really step back from life, you'll notice that life doesn't necessarily really make sense. So, the whole concept of the make sense ecosystem is I teach people a way of making sense of things. But very often I find that it's a nice power move to just not have to make sense of things, because you recognize that not everything makes sense in life. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Feel free to chime in. Great morning to everybody. Great morning, Phoenix Down Academy. But today, what we're going to do today is we're going to entertain. That's what we do. We entertain the idea, alternative perspectives, things that make you go, hmm. We're going to entertain the idea that nothing in our lives is random. Now, that's not me saying that nothing in our lives is random. What I'm saying is we're going to entertain that idea. We're going to go play in that sandbox. So I'm going to show you a concept and a tool from my new book, like I said, and that's Makes Sense. And that is called the crazy wall. Just something really fascinating that came to me while I was writing the book, and something that has dramatically changed my life and helped me, and it continues to. And that's a simple but powerful way to map out your past. We're very often taught to get rid of our past, move on from our past, but there's a lot of value we can find in our past looking at it through the lens that we have now. So we're going to learn how to map out our past, connect the dots, all the dots that we'll find, and finally understand our life story. If that's interesting to you, then you are in the right place. Hello, Alexi. I hope you are good. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I had food poisoning in Mexico, which is a pretty common thing right there. I see Tina Presents Official. Is that Tina from the Dragonfly Academy? I think it probably is. Great morning. YouTube wasn't being cooperative to let me respond. Okay, gotcha. Balancing Life with Shauna. I believe that's Shauna from the Dragonfly Flight Academy. And then there's Holly Lawton. Okay, great. We've got some familiar friends from our Dragonfly Flight Academy. And yeah, bummer. But you know what? We're going to talk about this. Was it a bummer, or was it just part of the whole thing? Did it have meaning? So if anybody, I just want to give a shout out to the folks that are joining us from our Dragonfly Flight Academy. Yes, it's Tina, Aliana, and yes, it's me, Shauna. That's great. That's so cool. Hello from Cancun. So as a podcaster, I've got to the point where I'm a full-time podcaster, which is why I still broadcast even if I'm in Cancun. from my hotel room because it's a full-time gig now. I've learned how to monetize and make a full-time living out of podcasting. So that is just a wide open space, and there's so much opportunity. There's 4 million podcasts out there, and like less than 1% of people are doing it right, growing it, making it impactful, and also making money. So we started something called the Dragonfly Flight Academy or Dragonfly Podcast Academy. And some of those people are here with us on the YouTube channel. If you've ever been podcast curious or you have a podcast, some people have podcasts that have hundreds of episodes, but they've never made a dollar. They've never grown it. We're teaching people how to do that, and that's on the school platform. So if you're interested in that, reach out to me through any of my Make Sense ecosystem. You can typically find us on all social media platforms at Dr. JC Doornick and ask some questions about that. We'd love to have you join us. People are getting extraordinary results, and we're building a great community. Okay, so like I said, back on track. See, stuff like that won't be in the podcast. And by the end of this episode, you won't just understand your past, you'll start seeing the blueprint for your future. It's an interesting way of looking at life. Is we're not just looking to understand our past, but we're going to create a system and have a tool that is going to lay the foundation of the blueprint for our future. So we're going to connect the dots today. All right. So one of the biggest challenges that we face as humans is trying to understand our life while standing inside of it. This is a cool concept. And I think we do this without even knowing it. So we ask questions like this: why did this happen to me? Why do I keep repeating the same patterns? What do or why do I think this way? How do I find my purpose? Or how do I get unstuck in life? I can't tell you how many people come to me and claim that they're stuck. It's an interesting thing to say that you're stuck. I mean, where are you stuck? Is somebody holding you down? Have you been trapped in some sort of quicksand, or are you stuck inside your mind? So one of the answers that I typically give when people claim that they're stuck is, interesting. And I just allow that person to think about it. But underneath all of those questions that I just mentioned is a deeper desire for mental clarity. In our ecosystem, in the Make Sense Academy and our Dragonfly Academy and all the work that I do, we always say that we seek clarity before action. You see, we don't believe that people are actually stuck for the reasons that they think they are. We think that people don't understand the power of perception and how they've been programmed and conditioned in life. And it's skewed the way that they look at life. Wayne Dyer always said, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So underneath all of those questions is a deeper desire for mental clarity. Once we have mental clarity, it's like we're clear for takeoff. So to understand our life story and know that it means something, I think we're all trying to do that. But here's the truth that I have uncovered, and I'm here to share that with you today. There's a pattern to all of it, but you can't see it when you're standing inside of it. There it is again. It's like trying to read the label of something from the inside of a bottle. You can't see it. So what does that mean? Let's just kind of address that right now. If you're standing inside of an unconscious programmed mind that you're unaware of, that's what it means to be unconscious, and you're looking at things, it's very, very difficult. I think it was Winston Churchill that says that you can't reason with a lion when your head is in its mouth, right? So we're going to learn today to kind of step back and look at things from a different vantage point. That's a great deal of the work that I do in my book and in the whole Make Sense ecosystem is I allow myself to hold on for a second, the power of that pause, and step back and obtain alternative perspectives, different vantage points of things. That's why we always say, interesting. Let me see what I think about that. Now, you're going to have to fight the forces that are demanding certainty and rapid response from you in the world, right? People don't want to wait for you to think about what they said to you. They want a response. So there's a bit of a challenge there, but we don't want to, try to read the label from the inside of the bottle. We want to step outside the bottle. So let me introduce you to this concept called the crazy wall. Now, remember, this is an exercise and you can kind of play with it. But what you're really going to want to do is in the book, if you have the book, Make Sense, How to Rewire Your Mind, Transform Your Life by me, If you get the book, on the inside, there's a QR code, and then you can download the whole. We're going to just touch on the crazy wall today because I'm just going to point it out to you. But think about it. I don't know if you know what a crazy wall is, but you've seen this before in movies. Detectives are sometimes, looking at this wall with post-it notes and pictures and all of that and pins and red yarn. And they very often in the movies call them investigation boards. And they have photos, push pins, red string connecting all the things together. Sometimes, you see this in, you know, when they're trying to catch a killer and things like that. At first glance, all of that looks like chaos, but to the person that's building it, it's a system of connecting the dots and understanding how everything relates. So in the movies, this system is usually used to catch the bad guy, the killer, or to solve a crime, connecting all the dots, So very often that's how they do it. They kind of put it all up on the wall, and that's why we call it a crazy wall. And they try to connect the dots using the red string. And that's very often how detectives crack the case. So now imagine that same concept and how it applies to your life, your own life. So it becomes kind of like the personal growth framework that helps you step outside of your story and become something most people never become. And that would be an open, curious, non judgmental detective of your own life. So park there for a second. What we're saying is, in a non judgmental way, in a non-labeling, in a non-forced to give meaning to everything way, putting everything up on the wall from your life, all these events, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And just stepping back and allowing yourself to just be open and curious, which means you don't know, right? Interesting. Let me look at this not only as I see it, but from multiple vantage points. Big part of my book. And be non-judgmental, and we can just become a detective of our own life. I just think that's a power move right there, is to just allow yourself to become a detective of your own life. And by the way, for those of you that are commenting, I'll be back there and we'll do some interactions. So if you have any questions or you have any insights about anything that I say, that could end up in the podcast episode. So we'll interact in just a little bit. So that detective of your own life, which means not that it doesn't mean that you're a victim or a judge or even a hero of your life, but a detective, because detectives don't assume, they observe and then they connect. This is a really interesting, if you're going to be a detective of your own life, it means you're going to stop assuming. And most of the time that we assume, we don't understand that that is just something that comes automatically. So we're going to stop assuming and we're just going to start connecting the dots, right? We're looking for evidence. And that's a big move for you. So you get curious. And instead of asking, why me? You start asking questions like this. Why, or what did this shape in me? What belief came from this? What strength was built here? And what was this preparing me for? This is a fascinating thing to do. Go back to one of your biggest traumas. And I'm sorry to do that for you, because I know a lot of you have some pretty heavy ones. But go back to these big events that happen and their traumas, or they could have been exciting things, or you could go back and remember a time that you were very excited to move into a phase of your life and then found out that it was like a shitstorm at some other part. But what a cool question to say, what was that preparing me for? So that would be how you could connect dots. So if that's up on your wall, that would be how you would put a push pin in a big event, and you would use that red yarn to connect it to something else. So that's how you create the connections. So now you're not reacting to your life, you're starting to make sense of your life story. So there's a quote from Steve Jobs. This is a very, very cool concept that very much relates to this. So Steve Jobs said, you can't connect the dots looking forward, only backwards. Now, like I said, we're very often conditioned to think that the past is the past. The future is mysterious. The present is a gift, right? So we're taught about that, but we're actually looking back at the past right now because we're recognizing that the only way we can make sense of the present is by connecting the dots. And the only place that the dots exist are in the past and the present, not in the future. So that's important because most people hear that, but they don't live it. Most people are still trying to control the future instead of understanding the past. And one of the things that we speak about a lot on this show is that if you're constantly living in the future, it's robbing you from existing in the only place that life exists, and that's the present moment. So we always talk about unwrapping the present moment. So you are the result of every experience that you've ever had right now. Now, we don't have to dwell on the past, but there's a lot of information that we can gain from the past. You are the result of every experience that you've ever had. And that's every relationship, every win, loss, and every moment of overcoming past trauma, even every breakthrough. All of it has converged into what you are right now. Very fascinating. I am. And here's the part that changes everything. The dot. Remember, we're talking about that. Steve Jobs says you can only connect dots from the past, not in the future. And now we understand why. But the dot that you are today is influencing every dot that will come next. So there's another argument for how important it is to not only unwrap the present moment and just acknowledge it, but whatever you do and you decide to do today is facilitating future connections of future dots. So imagine, go back to a time and imagine if you, and this is a big part of the interface response system that we teach in the book. If you were to go back to a time in your life with the knowledge and look at it through the lens that you have now, you could have responded differently. In fact, rather than react, respond to it, and that would change your whole life. Well, you can go back now and resolve some of that. Talk about resolving childhood trauma. If you go back to a traumatic event in your life, and this is why it's so cool to have it all up there, and we have an exercise for it, and I'll go over it a little bit, but you look at it, that event through your lens right now, you could probably resolve it and probably look at a different way of responding to it, which could therefore potentially change your reality right now. But the dot that you are today, it's a very important dot because it is going to facilitate and attract the dots that are coming. So I love to work on the present moment. So if you don't understand this dot that you are today, you can't consciously begin to shape your future. So what we're offering you right now is this idea of just really acknowledging that the power of now, like Eckhart Tolle says, and the dot that you are now. Because once you acknowledge that, you can start having a lot of influence on your future dots. So now this is where people resist, though, because when you look at our past, you'll notice that there are things there that didn't feel good. Why would we want to acknowledge things that didn't feel good? Things like pain, loss, confusion, and moments that we wish never happened. Are there any moments in your past that you wish never happened? So through exercises like this one, the crazy wall, I've learned to practice radical acceptance of everything. Now, that might be tough for some people because how could you radically accept something that was just terrible in your life, right? So when people ask me, very often people say, "Hey, Dragon, how are you doing?" I mean, in fact, people do it all the time. And I'm honored. But my answer to that is it's all good. Now, when I say it's all good, I'm not saying that, and here's the distinction. I'm not saying that everything felt good. I'm saying that everything served me. Do you see the difference? By saying it's all good, I'm not saying everything was actually good. I'm saying it all served me. Alexi says radical acceptance or responsibility. Yeah, they're very, very interesting correlation right there. Let's see what some other people are saying. So good morning. Dragonfly Podcast Academy is amazing. Finally able to log in. So there's jam session with Tina. Okay, cool. She's here again with my podcast channel. Okay, cool. I'm standing on the other side of that detective work. The vulnerability and humility of looking in the past contributed to the healing and made her a confident woman that she is today. So that's a profound statement, Tina. And I just want to, chat with you on this a little bit. So she's saying that she's standing now, she's recognizing now. This is a highly conscious person. She's standing there now, of that detective work. What a cool thing to say. She's recognizing she's done the work, right? And there's a lot more work to do. But the vulnerability and humility of looking in the past contributed to the healing. She's recognizing that that hard work, the vulnerability, the humility of looking into the past has contributed to the healing that she's experienced and made her a confident woman. So that's present moment thinking. That's what I refer to, Tina, as unwrapping the present. Unwrapping the present moment is not just acknowledging that you exist here right now. In fact, it's the only place that you exist. It's also acknowledging, like you're doing right now, with gratitude, you're doing how you got here, how this came about. And that is a very, very powerful thing to do. I love that. So, Unspoken Thoughts says, tell us about traumas. Well, what do you want to know about traumas? Unspoken Thoughts, right? I can't tell you about traumas. I can tell you about my traumas. I think you're probably asking in some way to make sense of traumas. I think that's probably what you're asking. What if we were to ask that question? You know, if you were to pick a trauma and ask that question of, you know, what was this preparing me for? Right? I mean, I could take any trauma that I've been through, whether it was loss or some sort of emotional trauma or abandonment or anything like that. And if I look at it and just experience what it was like, you know, I'm going to have confusion and victimization and all that stuff. You know, I'm going to, I call that negotiating with my circumstances at the time. But if I don't negotiate with my circumstances and I ask a question like, what was this preparing me for? It's pretty plain to see, you know, so that's something that I love to do. I see Najami is here. Grand Rising. How you loving today, darlings? That's what she always says. I love that. So that's all I would say about traumas, because you guys all have your own traumas and you've all painted them in a certain way as things that happened to you. But either way you look at it, you can't change what happened. So you should be able to start asking questions of what was this preparing me for? How did this happen for me? And you just have to be careful and not think that that means accept that it was okay, but ask how it served you. Now, if you haven't figured that out yet because you're still dwelling in it and you're still feeling like because that happened, you're at a deficit in life, you're at a disadvantage, well, then you've got some work to do, right? Because if you want to move forward, you have to reframe. You know, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So feel free to ask more questions about that. But, you know, that's what I have to say about trauma. That's all I have to say about that. Okay. So this is where I'd move over to a board, right? So let's play with this idea. Remember, I have a whole exercise in the book, but you could either move over, ideally would be a cork board. I don't know if everybody has a cork board there, but maybe one day you'll get one. Or you can even use a piece of paper, or you could use, you know, a dry erase board or something like that. So the first thing that I would recommend, another exercise from chapter 2 in the book, is called the lifeline. I would draw a line. This is how you build your crazy wall. Ideally, like I said, you would have the materials, you'd have a big cork board, okay? You'd have the ability to have, you know, some pictures and some scissors and some Post-it notes and things like that. You'd have some push pins and some red yarn. That's ideal. But here's what I want you to do. On a piece of paper, because you probably don't have all those things right now, you're going to draw a line from left to right in the middle of the piece of paper. And I would use the paper in landscape form. The left side of the paper represents your birth, when things started, okay? And then all the way on the right side of the paper would represent the inevitability of your death. And I want you, just for the sake, if you're older than 75 years old, well, then you're cracking the code and you're breaking the odds. So good for you. But the average living of, you know, a man or a woman on average is probably like 73, 74. So I'm going to give you 75. So 75 is the number on the other side, and you're going to draw a line across it. So left is birth, right is death. So estimate on that line. This is important to phase place yourself when you build your crazy wall, because you're going to find where you are. because that the whole crazy wall is about you. So on that line, you're going to estimate, so if the 50-yard line between 0 and 75 is in the middle, find out where you are approximately. And that's where you're going to put, that's where you would put the word me, or you would put a picture of yourself and tack it up there on the wall. So a lot of fun to do it on the wall because then it really becomes a crazy wall. And the reason why we call it crazy is because until you gain clarity, it's chaos. It seems crazy. So find out where you are, and that's where you are today. So then you start placing key moments around it at approximately the time that they happened. That's important because if something happened when you were a kid, you need to look at it now through your lens and acknowledge that you were just a kid at that time. And it'll help you embrace and understand why it appeared to be the way it did. You had very little life experience and very little coping mechanisms. You had very little sense making skills. You just basically did what your mother, father, teacher, preacher, teacher, evolution, and society conditioned you to do. You just reacted. So that's why you'd want to phase place the events. So take all the events and the big events, the traumas, the victories, the turning points, the relationships, etc. They don't have to all be traumatic, by the way. It could also be big life-changing events. So there's your crazy wall. You're starting to build it. Anything of significance, you're putting it on and you're just putting it relative to where you are. Now, another fun thing, and the reason why you draw the line is not just from left to right. In the book, the lifeline has an above and below it as well. So the reason why I want you to consider whether or not to put it above or below is because above would represent open and curious and conscious at that time that the event happened. This is a big part of the crazy wall. If you were to put it below, it would be because at that time you didn't know what you didn't know. You were unconscious, sleepwalking per se. So not only are you putting these things in the timeline sense, but you're also indicating whether or not they were above or below the line. So once again, above is open, curious, and conscious. So a lot of things that happened in my life at the time that I thought they happened to me, I was unconscious. So I would put them above, right? And sometimes you'll notice that you can move them above or below. I'm sorry, I would have put those, if I was unconscious, I'd put them up below, and then conscious, I would put them above. Okay, so then you start connecting them. This is the exercise. If you have a cork board or, some sort of a mechanism that you could push pin or on a wall, you could even use a wall, but be careful that somebody might get upset with you for putting holes in the walls, because that's sometimes the way it's done in the movies. Otherwise, you can use different colored pencils and pens and things like that. No need to do this personally. So you'll start to see when you start to connect things. First of all, it's fun to just even acknowledge how they're connected. Oh, because of this happened. I never would have met this person had I not had this happen. So I could look at my divorce. I could look at a divorce that I had, and I could recognize that had that not happened, I would not have met my wife. I would not have my daughter right now, things like that. Okay. I would not have lived in this place. And because I lived in this place, this happened, right? So we start to make sense of things and we start to connect the dots. So, you start to see things like, oh, that's where this came from. That's why I react that way. That's where I built that strength. That's where I obtained that talent. That's where I gained and obtained that opportunity, which wouldn't have happened if not for that. We very often don't make those connections. That's what shaped this belief that I have right now. Oh, interesting. That's what shaped this belief. There you go. Alexis is saying trauma again. So if we look at trauma, you have a choice. You can either look at trauma as something that happened to you and kind of feel like you get a hall pass, and you don't have to do certain things because something happened to you. Or, and this is a choice, or you could look at it and say, what was that preparing me for? What did that get me ready for? What happened in my life after that as a result of it? So we can always find that. And it's not about getting to this place where everything is hunky-dory and perfect. It's just about making sense of it. Because what you'll find is that the whole exercise is about getting to this place right now when we unwrap the present moment and say, everything is pretty freaking cool, Now, you'll start to notice that what felt random starts to kind of reveal life patterns in your life. It's really interesting when you start to notice that there's a pattern to your life. And those life patterns often become the answer to the question that a lot of us ask, which is, how do I find my purpose? A lot of people say, how do I find my purpose? Why am I here? What is the purpose of my life? And the reason why this exercise helps that is because what I've found through this work is that your purpose is not something that you go find. Interesting. Your purpose is not something you go find. It's something that you uncover. So very often people, when they're thinking about what's my purpose in life, they're looking for it in the not now. But when you go through this exercise, very often it will say, oh, that's my purpose. I always had a hunch about that. Interesting. Why did I forget that? How did I forget that? So it's not something that we go find. It's something that we uncover. And that happens when you understand what has been shaping you all along. So Alexi, the traumas, for those of you listening just to this podcast, this is a live broadcast right now, and some folks are chiming in and asking us questions. And traumas is a big one, Alexi. So, that's part of your crazy wall. That's part of your lifeline. And you start to say, how did that shape me? How did that strengthen me? What belief did that give me? And is it time to let go of that belief? It's just about making sense of things. It's not about, very much like forgiveness. When I forgive someone, I'm not saying what they did was okay. What I'm doing is I'm saying, I understand what it was now, and I understand that it doesn't serve me, and I'm letting it go. So that's why I'm forgiving you, is it no longer has any power over me. That's a decision. Now, people often ask me, they'll say, Dragon, how do I know if I'm on the right track? Well, first of all, is it really important to know that we're on the right track? I think that if we spend our lives trying to make sure we're on the right track, I think we're gonna needlessly, suffer from that. But they very often say, how do I know that I'm on the right track? And what I tell them is that, this is where the interface response system comes in, is when you ask a question like that, like, how do I know if I'm on the right track? You have to be able to look at your track, look at the things that are going on in your life from a different vantage point. That's why I built the interface response system, which is that 4-step system in my book. So here's a simple version of it. I like to look at life like it's a mirror. If we look at life like it's a mirror, most people get mad at the mirror. And this is a trauma thing as well, Alexi. Most people get mad at the mirror that they're looking in when they don't like what they see. So the interface response system puts you in the habit of looking at that mirror differently and saying, okay, what do I need to change about me to get a different reflection, to get a different outcome, a different response? That's it. So Bathrobe Guy says, suffering is a feeling of discontent brought about by your ego's desire for a situation to be different. That's going to be on the podcast. I love that. So from Substack, Bathrobe Guy, and in parentheses, it says robes. Go check him out. It says, suffering is a feeling of discontent. So, when we suffer, we feel discontent, and it's brought about by our ego's desire for a situation to be different than it is. I love that. So if you look at your ego's desire to have something be different, that's like trying to drink water with a fork, right? It is what it is. But the only thing we can do, Bathrobe Guy, is change the way we look at it. So just like Wayne Dyer says, and this is one of the tenets of the Make Sense Academy. By the way, if you like this stuff and you really want to do the work, we've got our podcast academy. That's called the Dragonfly Podcast Academy. But we also have our Make Sense Academy, which is on the school platform. Shout out to all of you that are in that. And that's a place where we mastermind almost daily, and we really, really take these topics and do the work, and we really entrench and learn about the interface response system. For those of you that have my book, I also offer a free mastermind once a month. It typically happens on the second Tuesday of every month, and you're welcome to come check that out. Even if you don't have the book, you're welcome to that. So that's what it's about, right? So the interface response system puts us in the habit of looking at that mirror that we typically don't like. And you just related it to the ego, Bathroom Guy. and say, okay, what do I need to change about me to get a different reflection, a different outcome? That's in our control. So success is not about everything in our lives going perfectly. It's really about collaboration. Every setback, every frustration is just life giving you feedback. I love that. I also like to look at the idea that the thoughts in my head are just suggestions that my head is putting in the suggestion box. So success is about calibration. It's not about everything going perfectly. And it's just about giving us feedback. Oh, that was interesting feedback. What do I want to do with it? And that becomes the signal. And that's a chance for us to reframe and adjust. What that's saying is that if we tap into the signal and we look at what's being provided for us and we ask the right questions, you'll start to notice the pattern and you'll start to realize that that chaotic crazy wall actually makes a lot of sense, but we have to connect the dots. So if you're staying curious instead of getting frustrated, and that's a choice, how could I just become open and curious? Listen, your stress response system is going to respond like it is. That's programmed and conditioned. You can't change that. And it happens without asking you. You know, your stress response system doesn't ask you for permission to show up. But when it does, you can get open and curious, and you can become that detective instead of getting frustrated from it like a victim, and just realize you're not lost. You're actually exactly where you need to be, and these things could be useful. So here's the realization that I want to leave you with today as I do my first live broadcast and podcast from one day post food poisoning from Cancun. And I will come back and check some of the other things that you guys have written. But here's what I want to leave you with today. Your life is not a series of random events. It's a connected system of meaning. And that's just entertaining that idea. I'm not saying that it is because I don't know, right? At this time, that's the way I'm looking at life, is that it's not a series of random events. It's a connected system of meaning. And I like to look at it that way. I choose to look at it that way. But meaning is not something that you go out and find. It's something that you unveil and discover and see when you start connecting the dots. It already exists, meaning. Like the answer to a mathematic question already exists, but sometimes you have to add things up together and subtract things. That's the same way I look at life. And most people never see it because they never step back far enough and take the time in this crazy world to have a good look at it. So change the way you look at things. So let me ask you this. What if what you're going through right now, and we can call it confusion, the uncertainty, the frustration, what if this is just another dot? What if this is just another dot, not the end of your story? Okay, not the exclamation point, the defining end of your story, but just a piece of your crazy wall that hasn't yet been connected yet. Hasn't been connected yet. So maybe the goal today, if you want to set a goal today, I like to set easy goals, just a shift, right? I'm going to give you something to put in your big pile of shift. Maybe the goal today is to simply get curious and stop asking, why is this happening to me? We stop asking, why is this happening? And instead, ask a better question like this one. What is this preparing me for? That's what I love. So remember, if you learn something today, give it away. That's the way it's going to stay. The highest form of self-actualization is when you take something that you learned, that you grabbed, and you go teach it to somebody else. To teach is to learn twice, but it's when you give it away, when you pay it forward, when you serve humanity, that your life goes to the highest. So I hope that you'll share this around. And remember, this episode will be cleaned up and posted on Friday on the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. And that will include some of you guys in there. So here comes Bathrobe Guy again. Excuse me. I find that we spend much time searching for meaning rather than living in and understanding the meaning. Yeah, that's kind of what we were talking about, right? We're saying doesn't live in the not now or elsewhere, right? It's something about unveiling. Diane gives a question mark a green check mark to that. Rather than living in and understanding that the meaning is already there. Yeah, of course you find that. You know why you find that? Because you're you're conscious, right? You're aware. If a lot of people say, what do I do with this information that you just said? So the first step is to just allow yourself to become more aware. Diane says, we're all just dots on the earth. Yeah, there you go. Let's see what we got on YouTube here. We got some people understanding. I believe that we have many purposes. The Bushwoman Najami says that. Yeah. And you know what? Even if somebody else says, I don't believe that, it doesn't matter. That's what she believes. And that's good enough for me. So Jamie sessions with Tina, or jam sessions with Tina. Jamie. I love the idea about perspective, spending my days saying why me, complaining and feeling sorry for myself isn't what I was made for. And that's fine. But you know what? People that are looking at life that way think that their life was made for that. When you are a victim, it's very hard to see that you're being a victim. It's a choice. And what I found is that being a victim does serve you. I know that sounds crazy, but at the times that I noticed that I was a victim and I play this lifeline game and the crazy wall game, and I acknowledge at that phase of my life, I was using my victim status to step out of responsibility. So we never think, say, or do anything that doesn't have value. Even when we do things that are negative and have a negative effect on us, they bring value. But sometimes we have to connect the dots. Oh, yes, that time in my life, I was extremely overwhelmed, suffering with anxiety because of this, this, and this. And the reason why I did this was to take myself out of responsibility, and being a victim was very handy at that time. So Holly Totten says the conscious and unconscious is a big deal when figuring things out. Yeah, I love this in the book. Oh, that's great. And then jam sessions with Tina, it says, oh, I agree. I realized one day that that's what I was doing. Yeah, I realized one day. Alexi says, here's list you are included. Here, list you are included. I'm sorry, my friend. I don't know what that means. Bathrobe Guy is here again. Bathrobe Guy, I'm liking your stuff. I'm liking what you're putting down. I am the person who is kind and loving towards people. Often, I'm not sure if I'm reading that right. Person who is kind and loving towards people often does not see the meaning in that and keeps looking for something. Yeah, I mean, think about it. Let's end with that. We're all kind of looking for stuff elsewhere. And that's what's so glorious about unwrapping the present moment, is that it's already here. It's already here. If you really, really think about it, even when I had food poisoning the other day, the present moment is wonderful. Where life's actually taking place is wonderful. And I think one of the big takeaways about this conversation today is how we're just looking for things. The reason why the wall is crazy and it's chaotic is because we're looking in the wrong places and we're not connecting the dots, and we're thinking that everything is random, right? Oh, he corrected it. A person who is kind and loving towards people often does not see the meaning in that and keeps looking for something else. Yeah. Yeah, that's a bit simplified, but you get the concept. Sure, I do get the concept. So thanks so much for being here. We will go back to Mondays as of next week. And next week, we're going to talk about a really funny concept of not taking life so seriously. It's going to be about the burden of seriousness. I love that. So checking out from Cancun. Like I said, this episode, it's going to be cleaned up. It's going to be probably like a 25-minute episode, and it'll be posted on Friday on the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast, which is exploding. Got some amazing guests coming up. Oh my God, just extraordinary breakthrough guests that are reaching out to us now and asking us to be on our show. And it's just crazy how all this happened, but it makes perfect sense because I decided to do it just like you can right now. And I did it with a no matter what at the end. So you can always count on this show, and we'll always be here Mondays at 8 a.m. unless I'm almost dying, in which time we'll just reschedule it. But love and appreciate you all, and cool seeing you on Clubhouse. Yeah, Clubhouse. For those of you that use the audio platform Clubhouse, I'm there every Wednesday. So that'll be tomorrow. On Clubhouse, and that's just an audio platform, and I usually beta test some of these things in there, and it's fun. Yeah, it's nice to have you here, Alexi. Have a wonderful day, and I appreciate you. I appreciate the opportunity to come to you today. It was very, very beneficial for me as well. Bye bye now.